everybody, and welcome back to the No Vacancy podcast. I, of course, am Glenn Hausman here at AAHOA. And boy, it's been a long day, and I'm starting to get a little sleepy. But fortunately, I've got somebody here that's going to wake me right up. The pressure's on now there, Chip.
Happy to be here. Happy to be here today.
Of course, I have Chip Olson, the EVP and Chief Development Officer, North America with Wyndham Hotel Group in friendly Parsippany, New Jersey. I'm a New York guy. You're a Jersey guy. I'm not sure if we're supposed to, have a nice conversation here or, take it outside.
We can take it outside. I got some people. Don't worry about that.
I usually like to start off the conversations by, making enemies of my guests. I find it goes real well that way.
Although New York is one of my favorite cities, so
Right.
I can't really be upset with New York. And I worked out in New York for a bunch of years.
Oh,
too,
yeah?
so
You didn't have to grow up in the Jersey area or anything?
Yes, I did.
You did?
I did, yeah.
So is it always weird growing up in the shadow of New York City?
No, because I grew up in Long Beach Island,
Okay,
where the beaches are, the beautiful parts.
Totally different universe.
Totally different
Right,
universe.
yeah. Yeah, I grew up in Long Island, and I always felt I was missing out on something happening in New York City, So I moved to Brooklyn, lived there for 20 years, and then I realized time to get the heck out of Dodge.
Who would have thought Brooklyn would blow up to be where it is today now?
Well, honestly, what happened was it just got so dang cool. They're like, dude, you got to go. You're out. I couldn't fit into the skinny jeans
They take
anymore.
away your pull cord.
I could not do create
handlebar mustache.
I couldn't pull it off. I tried. I tried back in my previous life in the 1920s. I had a good one of those. I was actually going to be a supervillain in the 1800s. Is what I was going to be. I like tying women to railroad tracks.
Beautiful.
It's a weird fetish of mine. All right. That's not really what this podcast is all about. What we're here to talk about is the amazing things going on, down here at AAHOA and in San Antonio, live from here. It's an exciting event that we're at today. And how are you feeling about it here at AAHOA?
This is, I believe, my 23rd, 24th AAHOA.
Wow.
So, yeah, I know I don't look that old.
I was going to say second AAHOA, maybe, fresh out of elementary school.
But, I've been to a lot of these events, and it's just been amazing. Being with Wyndham, we're proud to be founding sponsors of AAHOA. But really, the uniqueness of seeing this grow from, the late 80s, early 90s when I started in the business to what it is today. I mean, they have 6,100 people here today.
Yep. And over 16,000 members, no less.
Yeah, and it's just incredible. And I'll tell you what, there seemed to be a time in the 90s where there was a lull. They seemed to get the initial launch, we seemed to be very excited. A lot of people were doing it. Then there was that lull, but it seems to be really back. And the engagement of the AAHOA members is higher than it's ever been.
Right, I agree with that. And let me give some of the non-hoteliers a little understanding of what's been going on here for the last couple of days. The Asian American Hotelers and Owners Association is a huge organization. We just said they have over 16,000 members. And in fact, AAHOA members own about 47%, I think, is the number of all hotels in the country.
Yeah, and with us, it's probably closer to 60%.
Right, which makes a lot of sense. Because the brands that you have are the ones that the initial arrivals from India, for example, took to, loved, were a part of, and so you've got a real strong foothold in this particular community. And what's interesting now is how the relationship between the AAHOA community and the brands has changed since the 1990s, where it seemed like it was all about fighting with you guys.
Yeah.
Right?
There was some confrontation.
Yeah.
It's kind of that New York, New Jersey thing
Yeah,
we were
right.
talking about earlier.
Except in this case, they took it outside.
But yeah, it's interesting how that's evolved. And,
Right.
I think as brands, we've learned, to listen to our customer. And our customer just aren't the guests. That's one section of customers. But for us also, it's the developers that are out in the marketplace and making sure we're marrying both needs to get the best experience for both people.
Right. So how did you guys all, come together? I know that AAHOA used to be about the fair rules of franchising. That seems like a distant memory now.
It really is. Well, I'm trying to think when that was. It's probably late 90s.
I think so. When I first came into the business, 97, 98-ish, that seemed to be the entire conversation.
Yeah, and I think at first everybody believed that confrontation was good, and it was good to have that dialogue and that checks and balances. No different than any other, the government or anyone else. They have their checks and balances. But what we found is that working together and becoming true partners really made it a much smoother transition for everybody. And when we work together and put the power of our voices together, we got a lot more done.
And you are absolutely right. I speak to folks at Wyndham. I speak to folks at other hotel companies as well. And I find that the ownership engagement with the major brands is more than ever. You guys will not introduce anything anymore without real owner buy-in before it's announced publicly.
That's correct. That's correct. We have, our FACs, which are franchise advisory councils. But even on the development side, and I handle most of the development, it's important to get the buy-in early on of what we're doing and what we're launching. So we put development board of advisors together, and we bring in people not just from our brands, but we'll do it from all the other brands too that own other brands, and say, okay, tell us what you're seeing out in the industry. What are the trends? What's happening out there? I don't want to build a hotel for today or design a hotel for today. I want to design a hotel that has sustainability long term.
That's pretty tricky, though, Chet, because it seems like, there's this one building, for example, and I know we're talking about inside the hotel, not the architectural design, but there's a hotel at 42nd and 8th that was built in the late 1990s that looked really freaking cool, but you could tell it wasn't going to look that way a couple of years later, and that kind of happened. It didn't really stick. It's like the Crystals Mall in Las Vegas, right?
Exactly.
It looked really futuristic, but then it just looks weird after a while. So
and I think the key to that is we talk about decorate and design.
Yeah.
Right? Good design never goes out of style. Decorating goes out of style. So when you build a brand, you really want to look at the design of that.
Interesting.
And so, like Super 8, for instance. When we talk about Super 8 and the evolution of that brand, we brought local art in, right? And then we felt that connected people to the community. It was no longer about just hanging a picture of a landscape or a steeple on the wall or something like that. Matter of fact, we've had some real fun auctioning off those prints on the Tonight Show and everything.
That's really funny. What a great PR move.
Oh, it was Ames Daris did it. It was a lot of fun. But really what we wanted to do is say, look, this isn't your mom and dad's hotel anymore. It's time now to get into the future. And by bringing the local art community and some black and white photos of that, it really connected that. And that's what the guest wants today, right? And the developer wants that too, but to make sure he gets a return on his investment at the same time.
Right. So how do you make sure that you balance everybody's needs with your portfolio of brands and owner expectations and guest demands?
It's listening. And I think initially both sides weren't listening to each other. And I think now we're more cognizant of the trends and what's happening in the world.
Right.
Look, you heard it today, and they had some panels on the millennial traveler. But the millennial traveler isn't just the person looking for a high-end hotel, if it's a boutique or lifestyle hotel. You can have boutique and lifestyle experiences in every hotel if you do it right. And that's what we're trying to do.
Yeah, that's one of the things that I think is a misnomer, that you think that they have to be completely separate. I feel like we saw the rise of this through what's called the lifestyle hotels, right? I personally have argued that there's no such thing as a lifestyle hotels. All hotels are lifestyle hotels in a way.
Or should be,
right? And I think that we've all matured past that sense of design, right? Now we're trying to capture this boutique-y thing, which also doesn't mean much to me, because we all want great design, as we've been talking about here, with a brand that makes us feel good, that reflects our personalities.
And that's the key, reflects our personality.
Yeah.
Look, there are brands out there that are aspirational.
Right.
I understand those brands that are aspirational. But there's brands out there that need to cater to the everyday consumer, that road warrior who's driving up and down the road, who says, I just want a good bed. That to him is a lifestyle, having that good bed. And Days Inn, brand awareness on Days Inn and Ramada, those brands, when you look at those, 80% amongst the consumers. That's a lifestyle to them. That's their lifestyle that they chose. They want to drive them down the road. They want to find a good, comfortable place to sleep, and that's what we do.
Right, and a brand like Nights Inn, for example, I don't know if it still is, but I always saw that as the truckers brand.
It was initially, right? That's exactly right. It was, it was a brand where the driver going down the road long nights and said, I need a good place to stay, and I'll stay at a Nights Inn. And they were single-story hotels, so you weren't walking upstairs or waiting for elevators. It was a great opportunity. Now we've taken that and developed a better model for it, for local communities and things. And Nights Inn's been a great growth brand for us. But more importantly, and I think that's the power of a big brand, for instance, we have 18 brands in our portfolio. And so having a unique identity for each of those brands is important. But it's also important that we don't only grow with the consumer, but grow with the developer. We have owners that started with Nights Inn and now have 50 or 100 hotels. And they've grown with our portfolio. And that's the excitement that we see in the business.
So 18 brands is really tough. I mean, I'm not going to put you on the spot and ask you to name them all, although I bet you could name them all. I don't think I can name them all, even though I know them all. But as I get older, the recall's a little bit tougher. It's hard enough to remember all the names of the brands. How then do you define them all so they're in specific channels that don't overlap with each other in any muddy way?
But it's no different than whether it's a restaurant or retail or anything else, right? There are hundreds of different brands
Right.
out in the stores. There's
Yeah, of
hundreds of
course.
different restaurants out there. So having a unique identity for 18 brands actually isn't as hard as you believe it is. There are, I have a lot of friends. Some of my friends have 18 personalities on their own, but I have 18 friends with 18 different personalities, and they all like something different.
Yeah, of course.
And so catering those people is what's important. You can't be everything to everyone. I think we tried that for a while.
That's
in
a
the
big
hotel
mistake.
business. Right.
Well, that's what the mass homogenization of the entire business was
Correct.
all about. That's when we used to make fun about waking up and not knowing what city you were in.
And I live that lifestyle, right? I'm a
Right.
road warrior, 150,000 miles a year on the airlines.
Right.
You're out traveling everywhere. And you used to wake up and I used to be like, okay, I have no idea where I'm going to call the front desk to find out where I am today.
Right.
Because you didn't know. And that's why, as we talked about the local art and doing things that have that little touch, a little bit of difference out there, it makes guests feel comfortable, but they still want consistency.
They
and
do,
That's important.
and everybody wants consistency, but it doesn't have to be in design consistency. It has to be in a comfort consistency, a feeling of being at home type of consistency, right?
And I think the interesting thing, too, is when you brought up the 18 different brands, and can you name them all? Part of us says we don't want you to name them all. We don't want you to know every one of our brands are under one umbrella.
Right.
Now, we tie that in
With
our
Wyndham's
loyalty.
Rewards.
Right. Wyndham Rewards ties that in for you. So, look, there are times that I want to travel and I just need a quick place to stay.
That's right.
I'll look for a day's in. There are times I want a meal, so I'll look at
That's
Ramada
right.
or Wyndham, and I look at that. And then I go on vacation with my family, and guess what? I'm in a different mood, and I want to stay at the Wyndham
Agreed.
brand, whether it's Bonnet Creek, the Galvez, any of those big, beautiful properties out there that I can redeem my points at. So that's typically what we're seeing now is earning vehicles. There's hotels that are earners and hotels that are burners.
Yeah,
and that's
totally.
what we try to find.
Right. Yeah, and that's so true. You're talking about the 18 different personalities, and you're joking around by being one person, but yeah, I have 18 different personalities when it comes to the types of hotels for exactly what you're saying. My needs are very different on each and every trip. My needs for this trip down here in San Antonio covering the AAHOA convention is extremely different than when I take my family away on vacation.
Yes, because when I take my family on vacation, my wife and kids, they dictate the terms of where we're staying and what we're doing.
Right, and honestly, as they should, because if I was going to dictate where we were going to stay, it would be on my couch.
That's correct. That's correct. That's exactly right. You want that unique experience, but when we travel as much as we do, we don't have it. So we want to make sure that our family gets that unique experience. Yeah. And that's where, a loyalty program comes in. And that's the importance, I think, of big brands and being part of an organization like Wyndham is having that ability to take those points and then share them with your family. Because you can't share that night out on the road or that great dinner you have with clients, but you can say, I've earned enough points, honey, now we can go out with the family and we can share that experience somewhere else. And we were able this year, actually, and we're about to launch, or continue to launch, we're releasing 25,000 of our timeshare properties. Now they're going to be part of the Wyndham Rewards program.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, so now you talk about, okay, I want a great experience and use my points. Now I can stay in places like a castle over in France. I can stay in Frank Sinatra's residence in Palm Springs.
That's pretty sweet.
Yeah, it really is. It's a really cool opportunity. And again, it's all at the same price point. Simplifying the program was probably the greatest thing we ever did, and that's why we were #1 in U.S. News and World Report.
Wow, that's a pretty impressive accomplishment right there. And I like how you slipped in the plug
Nice.
as well.
Yeah.
I'm all about the shameless plugs here.
I get paid by the Wyndham Rewards guys, so.
And the Wyndham Destination Network also is part of the Wyndham Rewards.
Correct.
Now,
Correct.
As well.
And that's been a big boon to us, that to have that ability, and we call it the blue thread, to tie all that into one industry. At the end of the day, we're in the hospitality business. It doesn't matter how people stay or where they stay. What matters is that we take care of their needs all along the way. And to be able to do that, whether it's a hotel, a vacation ownership, or a timeshare piece, or exchange company, it allows us to do that for the guest.
Yeah, it certainly does. Now, we've talked about the guests, but what about the owners, 18 brands? How do they know what the right brand is for them?
That's probably the most important thing that my job is.
Right.
We'll get owners that come in and say, I'm ready to build a Days Inn. Why? Well, my dad built a Days Inn and he was very successful with it. And I said, okay, that's great, but we have other brands. Let's see what you're willing to do. And we look at marketplaces and we say, okay, we need the right owner in the right market with the right box. It's important that we marry all three of those up.
Right.
So we sit down with the customer and we say, what are you looking for? Because your personality should match the brand's personality.
Interesting.
Otherwise,
Right.
you have a conflict all along the way. If I have somebody that's very tech savvy and wants to do things, so we'll look at a Trip hotel or we'll look at a Wingate. right?
Right.
Because that more suits their needs. If I have somebody that really is into full service and catering and wants to really take care of the guests that way, or loves the meeting business, then we look at a full service Wyndham. But it's marrying those two and having the ability to do that so that when somebody calls me, I'm not pushing one brand on that individual. I'm saying, because I have multiple opportunities
Yeah,
for
of course.
So I'm not saying, hey, this is all I have to sell you. That's why it's the best. No.
Right.
What I'm saying is it matches what you want. It matches what your guests want. So this is going to be the best for you. And here's one or two options for you.
But you also have the added challenge because it's not a clean slate. You're a very established company with thousands and thousands and thousands and thousands of hotels.
8,000.
Yeah, 8,000. So in a particular market, it might not be practical to say, even though this guy is perfect for X product, it might already be there, and that's difficult for you guys, right?
Correct. And you know what I try and teach everybody is the power of no.
Right.
It's important to say to somebody, look, it's not going to work for me. The worst thing that you can do in this industry is cannibalize yourself, right? We want everybody to be successful. The best way for us to do our job is I can sell 5 different brands to 5 different owners. Or I can have one great owner, give him a phenomenal experience, a great return on his investment, and he can turn around and build 5 hotels with me. And that's the partnership that we look for with franchising.
Right. So it's really a matter of looking out for each other, which takes us back to what we were talking about before in terms of putting in new brand features as well.
Yeah, this is a partnership. And if we don't listen to our guests and we don't listen to our owners, then we're not doing our job. And so it's important when we do this is that we sit down and we're constantly in the marketplace, we're constantly talking to people saying, as we talked about earlier, what's next? What can we do to improve what we do without costing a fortune to put it in there?
Yeah, that makes an awful lot of sense. So, the next thing I wanted to talk to you a little bit about is what does really being part of a brand mean to hoteliers today?
It depends on what brands I guess you're part of, right?
Right.
For us, having 8,000 hotels, being one of the largest hotel companies in the world, and the world is shrinking. That's how we look at this, right? We are the largest hotel company in China right now, right? We just at Wyndham Rewards had our 50 millionth guest, 50 millionth loyalty member over in Xiamen, China. So being part of that, as inbound travelers continue to come to this country, they need to recognize something. The cost to capture that guest for smaller brands or for an independent hotel would be cost prohibitive. So being part of a brand gives us access to a guest at a much lower cost than they'd get on their own.
Yeah, which takes me back to the whole notion of the independent hotel versus the branded hotel. And a lot of hoteliers feel, the technology's out there, I'm just going to go at it alone. But then they get stuck relying on OTAs to deliver the lion's share of their business, and they don't have that negotiating power.
Right.
So I'm still all about the right brands for the right people at the right times, because I think that there's a big financial upside. Even though you're paying the fees, it's not quite what you're going to necessarily be paying when you can't negotiate on your own.
Correct. And people look at it and say, well, I don't have to pay a fee. I don't have to pay a fee. And I'm like, that's just one piece of what you're doing. When you look at the return on investment over the cost of a 5-year, 20-year,
right,
a lifespan of a hotel, you've got to factor all in the cost of what you're doing, what it costs you to operate that hotel. Because if you aren't a brand, you've got to market. Now I need to hire a marketing person, or maybe 2, whereas before I could rely on the brand to help us do that because they have that recognition, they own that guest already. So it's just a matter of funneling them into our hotel.
Right. Yeah. Okay. What's your favorite brand? Just kidding. We're not putting you on the spot.
All of them.
I was about to say you have 18 favorite brands.
Depends on the day, as we talked
right.
about. If I'm traveling with my wife, it's Wyndham Grand.
Yes. Yeah. Absolutely. And I will say, if I'm ever down in Disney, that Wyndham Bonnet Creek,
that Bonnet Creek property, you really can't do better than that, honestly.
Right.
I mean, when you stay in the Disney proper and being able to just jump on the bus, or what I do now is Uber actually over to the park.
Yep,
it's
absolutely
easy and cheap to do that. It's just a beautiful resort.
Yeah,
absolutely beautiful.
That's a good little tip right there, because those bus service, man, it takes forever.
My family are Disney people, and we made a mistake one time. We ran out and the bus was pulling away.
Oh God!
And I said, we're 40 minutes for the next, or 20 minutes for the next bus, but then 20 minutes there. I called an Uber, and I said, do you have Ubers here? And they were like, they responded right back. It was $6 for 8 of us, or 7 of us, to go right to the gate. And I was like, done.
Yeah.
And no wait, no stopping at hotels.
Hey, I would pay that just to avoid the tram to the parking lot, let alone all the way back to my room. So one of the things that we talk a lot about is disruption out there and how things are changing. What are you thinking about with brands and making sure that someone doesn't come around and disrupt what you're doing, like Uber has been in to the taxi industry, for example?
Everybody talks about disruption, and regardless of the company, a lot of what's going on out there already exists today, right? You know, when they talk about the sharing network and things like that, vacation ownership, that's what we've done, right? Our destination network, we've done that for a long time. So it's not new, and it's taking a different guest or maybe getting people to travel and try different experiences, and then they'll come back and stay with us. So, you know, we keep our eye on everything, but we don't consider it, a threat right now. We're more of just monitoring the situation, and we have to stay in our lane, do what we do best, and if we control that guest and we own that guest, we don't worry about it.
What are you most excited about right now?
You know, it's the brands that we have launching out there and the developers that we're working with here. We're seeing second and third generation owners come in and seeing that whole different perspective. So from a development guy, you know, you dealt with the same people for a lot of years, and I watched a lot of their kids, unfortunately, grow up.
I know what you mean.
I stopped into
Fortunately, they grew up, but unfortunately, it's been that long.
Now they're negotiating with me. It's a totally different world. But seeing them get involved with a totally different perspective and being value added to brands has been very exciting for us.
Yeah, I mean, coming back to this AAHOA community, a lot of the folks here that are making deals today grew up in hotels where their parents grew up in another country and then came over and had to figure this whole thing out. So you got guys that are in their mid-20s, 30 years old that have as much experience in their career as I do, and I'm twice their age.
Yeah, I have a couple of owners of some of our brands, the Wingate and a Hawthorne brand, that I've known because I stopped into the Days Inn, and I remember them running around as we were negotiating a contract in the living room, right, trying to get business done. And they came up to me, and I'm talking to him, and he says, well, you know my dad. And I'm like, no, I don't think I do. And he says, oh, my dad, we did the Days Inn back then, because Days Inn was one of those brands that launched a lot of people's careers in this business, and Howard Johnson was the other one. And so I'm like, wait a minute. You were that little kid? I'm like, no. Please tell me that's not true. You know, and now he owns 10 hotels on his own.
Yeah, it's really amazing. So they're so much more sophisticated in the sense that they've been able to learn from their parents for so long. How's that changed the dynamic in the relationship between what you're doing and what they're trying to accomplish?
You know, the interesting thing, I think back when I first started in this business, everybody worried about the deal. What's the deal? What's the deal? That's changed now with second generation. Now they want to know about the value. What's the value proposition of your brand versus anybody else's? How am I going to make more money with a Ramada, with a Howard Johnson, with a Hawthorne than I will with some of the competitors out there? And so it's a different dynamic. We're not haggling over pennies here or there, but we're more talking about how we can grow the business together.
Right. Yeah. So, before we wrap up, I do want to talk a little bit about Howard Johnson, which was a favorite of mine as a kid, not just the hotels, but the restaurants in particular.
So Jersey, New York, we were fried clams.
I was going to say the fried clams. Like, I think it was every Wednesday night or something like that. Every Wednesday night,
all you can eat fried clams. Like, everybody told me it was about the ice cream. I'm like, oh, no.
No.
It was about
Friendly
the
was the ice cream for me after school concerts.
Right.
But if I wanted fish fry clam night.
That is exactly right.
And it's so strange seeing some of those old buildings that have the former roof. It's still there. It's just a different color.
There's only one restaurant left now, though. But we're keeping the brand alive with the hotel side.
Yeah, absolutely.
And we've done a big renew program out with Howard Johnson. And for somebody like you that grew up in the Howard Johnson world and myself, which I love the brand. It was the first brand I ever sold in the industry, actually.
Oh, wow.
So for me, it was very exciting. But the renew program, what it does is bring retro back into the hotel. And there's a hotel in Connecticut that made a very cool retro feel vibe.
Right.
And that's what we're doing with the Howard Johnsons.
Could you explain that a little bit more? Because I'm a little out of touch with that. I saw what you guys were tentatively thinking about 2 to 3 years ago at the lodging conference, and it was a total retro thing, and I loved it. It was almost like stepping into 1964.
It is,
right?
It is, and it's still that way. Look, that speaks to a lifestyle, right? So you say Howard Johnson's not a lifestyle brand; it's been around forever.
Yeah.
Well, first of all, 70% brand awareness on Howard Johnson, so it hasn't been, been around forever. But that's a good thing. But now we want to bring you back. We want to bring you back in time, bring you back to that moment where you walk in and you have that Mad Men feel when you walk into that room, and you have that great, it evokes an emotion, right? That's what brands should do for you. It should evoke that emotion, and that's what we've done with everything. And we've been very successful and very lucky. When you look at brands like Microtel, you look at brands like Wingate that have won J.D. Power 14 out of 15 years. we've got that loyal following.
Right.
Now we need to make sure we keep them and keep evolving with it. And that's what we did with the new lobby with Microtel. We're still building them at a very, very low cost per key as compared to some of the other hotels out there. So new construction is accessible to a lot of new owners.
I'm still caught up in the Howard Johnson thing. I'm curious if with my Wyndham Rewards points I could get a 3-martini lunch and really live
That's
the
what we're
lifestyle,
talking about
right?
now. And fried clam.
I was right, exactly. You're always ahead of me with the fried clam jokes. It's a very difficult interview when someone keeps taking all your fried clam humor.
Well, I grew up, like you. I
Yeah.
grew up in that world, and it was an exciting place. And look, I came from a very small. My mom was a nurse, my dad was a truck driver, and they were separated, divorced. So we didn't have a lot of money. So being able to go to a restaurant and order as much as you wanted to, and say I can eat fried clams all night long, and my mom won't yell at me because it was such a phenomenal price.
Right.
That was one of the highlights of the week.
And there is nothing that is going to capture that feeling that I have. I try once or twice a year with the fried clams at White Castle at about 4 a.m., but it's not the same.
Not the same.
Not the same.
And that's the important thing. So when we talk about branding and you talk about how 18 brands can be different, well, that's what we talk about with Howard Johnson. That emotion exists inside most of us who grew up in the Northeast especially. Right. So being able to travel down to Ocala, Florida, right, which did our first Renew package, it literally felt like I was a little kid going to Disney for the first time again. Because I opened that door and there was the orange accent wall and there was the turquoise blue all around, and that emotion and that feeling came over me like, man, this is home again.
Yeah, it's amazing how everything old is new again, as the old cliche goes.
And that's the exciting part of what we're doing.
And if you guys are watching this right now, I'm trying to bring back bell-bottom pants.
I'm going to stay away from that, actually.
Probably a good call.
No shag carpeting, no bell-bottoms. I'm out.
Wyndham, so many historic brands. We got, Ramada, Howard Johnson, Days Inn, Super 8, Travelodge, all brands that, were just part of my life since forever, really.
Yeah, and the Travelodge brand's a unique one, too. We have a new campaign that we work with national parks, because over 60% of Travelodges are within an hour's drive of a national park. So when we look at that, we said, get up and go. It's time for adventure, and that's Travelodge. That's what it speaks to. If you're a person that loves adventure and you want to go to the national park, stay at the Travelodge, especially out west, right, where Travelodge really got its start and its roots. I think what we feel for Howard Johnson here on the East Coast, most of the people out west feel with Travelodge.
Yeah, absolutely. Whew, this has been a good conversation, Chip. Anything else that you want to add?
No, we really appreciate you guys having us here, but really for being at AAHOA, and like I said, being at 23 of these, to have this big a group out here and have active, engaged donors as much as they've ever been, it's exciting. It's an exciting time to be in the hotel business.
Yeah, it sure is. Almost as exciting as fried clam night. So yeah, I had to get one in there. Chip, thanks so much for being here. Shameless plug. How can people find you? How can people find Wyndham?
You know what? Give us a call at any time or email me at chip.olson, it's OHLSSON, at WYN.com. We look forward to doing business.
And I always get your Win.com confused with another company sometimes.
Yeah, there's an extra N on that other company.
I know. But when you get into the casino gaming business, let me know. That'd be great. We'll play some craps. We'll have some fried clams.
A little poker.
The whole thing.
I'll do a little poker.
I like that idea. Chip, thanks so much for being here.
Thank you, Glenn.
And thanks to all of you guys for watching and listening. It's been a great time, and we'll be back with more interviews here from AAHOA San Antonio, AAHOACon 17. Stay tuned.